Hi, welcome to part 40 on the Lackawanna Cutoff, where we'll be talking about stories along the cutoff. Hi, I'm Chuck Walsh, and we're inside the Coursen House. Now that name may not necessarily mean anything to you, but if you've watched enough of my videos, the name might be vaguely familiar. And in fact, we're looking at a map right now of the cutoff from 1906, before the cutoff was actually built. It's a survey map. And where we are right now is located right here on the map. It's 28 miles that's captured in a map that's about 70 feet long. We have only about maybe, 15 feet that are actually laid out right now. But we're going to be going to different places on this map by stories that involve those places. So what we're going to do is we're going to be moving that map along. Part of what we're going to talk about is here at Coursen House, which is located in Frelinghuysen Township. Okay, our first stop is going to be at Port Morris, all the way at the eastern part of the cutoff, over in here. The tower doesn't exist yet on this map because the tower won't be built for another 5 years after this map was created. But the story we're going to hear is from both Artie Erdman and Gerry Chrusz. We're going to talk about some unusual occurrences at the tower at Port Morris, otherwise known as UN Tower. Here's that story. Stories.
Funny story. Port Morris Junction, UN Tower.
Yeah, right.
On Saturdays, train number 5, the Lake Cities, would be held in Hoboken for the New York Times Sunday edition to be loaded on the train. And he'd come out of Hoboken about half an hour late, and he'd be running to make up time. And I was working second trick at UN Port Morris this one evening, and we had one heck of a thunderstorm. And thunderstorms at Port Morris were interesting because the mountains around you were striated with iron ore, which naturally attracted electricity, and behind the tower was the Jersey Central Power Light substation. So when you sat at Port Morris, you felt like you were sitting in the middle of a bullseye. So
you're also literally at the top of the mountain, so you're
on top of the mountain, right? Well, on Saturdays, Scranton used to want to run number 5 up the eastbound track at Bell's Bridge. So when it got to Stroudsburg Station, the trucks, it was easy to load the trucks with the newspapers. So the train dispatcher would give the operator at Port Morris a train order for number 5 to run west on the eastbound track from Bell's Bridge to Stroudsburg. So the dispatcher calls me, and I took the order. I took the Form A, which goes with the train order. I strung it up on the hoops. Now this thunderstorm is roaring away, and Andy Barbera was the engineer at number 5 that night.
I remember Andy.
And he calls me on the radio at Chester Junction. I said, Andy, I got train orders for you. He said, okay. So I go out, and I'm standing on the platform with this train order stick, holding it up, and there's lightning hitting everything higher than 10 feet tall around me. Finally, Andy comes around the curve, and he grabs the train order, and I'm soaking wet. The conductor, Freddie Roberts, was the conductor. He grabs the train order, and I run in the tower. And boy, I thought I was going to get it that night.
Well, Andy Barbera was I know he was the engineer, I guess famous for being the engineer on the last Phoebe Snow, at least the first section of it. I know, and reading all your stories on Facebook.
Oh, you've been reading them?
Yeah, I read them religiously. And there's a story in there about some very strange things happening, which involve, where Andy reports them on the cutoff. I don't know if you were...
On number 10, coming east on number 10, the New York Mail. Yes.
Yeah.
Port Morris was, at night, strange things would happen occasionally. Like, you'd see balls of light
Yeah,
down the track.
yeah. You would see lights on the end of the track, like somebody carrying a lantern across the track.
Yeah.
You saw them? Or did
Yeah.
you hear? Really?
What they were,
I've
I
never
don't-
heard of this.
I never knew what it was.
Sort of like the...
The whole story that I got
Go ahead.
was like in Chester Junction, where the CNJ was. There was a conductor that had an accident where he got ran over by the train, and he lost his arm.
The hookerman.
Yeah, hooker.
Yeah, the hookerman.
The hooker man.
That was down at Not Right, I think, over in, it'll be like Mount Olive,
Yeah,
Flanders,
yeah.
down there.
And
But I never heard of anything going on at Port Morris. But
it was
so
the ghost coming back. He was carrying a lantern looking for his arm.
So what did these things look like? I'm curious.
Just like a UFO, you know.
They were like incandescent. Well, there was ball-like. It was
Ball,
strange, yeah.
right?
Now, the Andy Barbera story, the way if my recollection is correct, involved with all sorts of strange things happening, like with the signal system, and they saw something down like in Greendale, so it wasn't even just Port Morris. It was like something was following them, or
No, what happened was number 15 went west, and number 10 would come east after they cleared. And
Yeah, they were mail trains.
yeah, and 15 also took New York State prisoners to
Elmira,
and Attica.
oh yeah.
That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
But the operator of Port Morris, I won't say who it was, started getting indications on the cutoff. The light would light to indicate a train, and it would go out. And number 10 is coming east, and he's coming to Johnsonburg, out here. And he called Port Morris on the radio, and he says, "You got a train coming west." And there was nothing else around. He said, "No, well, I see a light in front of me." So he's coming east, and he's going at a good clip. And whatever this thing was staying ahead of him. And then it disappeared by the tunnel. And the operators...
Roosevelt Tunnel, yeah.
The Roosevelt Tunnel. And then when number 10 came through the tunnel, this thing went north and it disappeared.
What year are we talking about, roughly?
Late 60s.
Late 60s.
Yeah.
Okay. Huh. Now, are there any? Was that an isolated thing?
No.
No. Really?
SE 98, ES 99. I was talking to. He's seen them same lights on it, and he's also running over the Highbridge branch from Highbridge to Chester Junction. He's seen that on the CNJ too.
Which is the Hookerman, the Flanders thing at Not Right, I think.
Yeah.
It's also, yeah. Which I understand. The way I understand it, I've never seen it personally, but apparently they're old employee timetables which used to have a note, sort of a warning down there for the CNJ, if any kind of light or anything at Not Right, do not stop. Like as if, as if that phenomenon, whatever it was,
Yeah.
had been going on for
Yeah.
many, many years. It wasn't like this just happened.
Well,
But that's a really, I've never, so you're saying that this happened more than once, maybe
yeah,
multiple times.
I would see it, and I was only,
You would
like I
see
said,
it, that's it.
part-time, you know.
But you're sitting, let's say you're sitting
I'm
or standing
sitting-
in the tower.
Sitting in a
second
tire on the
floor.
second floor.
Yeah. And which way? You're looking west?
I would look west, yeah. You'd see a light, look like somebody carrying a flashlight or a lantern. To this day, I don't know what it was.
And it would be, where would it be? Would it be down track level or would it
Track
be?
level.
Really?
And the railroad's on a fill out there too. I mean, it isn't accessible to people taking a stroll. I mean, it was.
But this was definitely not like a flashlight. It was.
Didn't.
It looked like a lantern. It was a dim light.
Really?
You looked at it long enough, it would move, like a waver, and then disappear. Yeah. What it was, I don't know. To this day, I couldn't tell you what it was.
And everybody that worked Port Morris Tower has seen it. I mean, I worked with other extra men, and we shared stories about the strange lights out there.
Well, you got
Really?
Yeah.
You got the meat to add to your list, I sort of like, what they were, we don't know.
Wow.
Spooks, ghosts, I don't know.
Or I've heard this explained that, and you're talking about the iron. I don't know if under certain circumstances it's possible that the iron deposits actually do create some kind of electrical charge, but I don't know if that's really the right word for it, but where you get some kind of visual phenomenon.
Well, I heard it was a combination of possibly the iron ore and the swamp gas creating these things.
Okay.
I don't know.
So it wasn't necessarily like a UFO, because I mean that's the, you know.
Except the thing Andy Barbera saw. That was strange.
So he now it was his different in a sense that from what.
Well, the difference was it was so bright he thought it was the headlight of a train coming to Greendale.
Oh, okay. And it actually, the way, and it didn't make any sound, I think if I remember
No.
right. So there was no sound.
It was way ahead,
And it-
far ahead of him.
And then but did the towerman at Port Morris also see that? Or was Andy the only one who actually?
No, he
witnessed?
saw it when it came east of Roseville Tunnel, and it came, as a curve. When you leave Port Morris, you head north, and then you head
Okay.
west to the tunnel. And this thing apparently was following the railroad, and the operator at UN saw it, and then it went north. He saw it go north,
Huh.
and then that would be east then.
Yeah, okay. So that's interesting that, so there are multiple witnesses. So I really thought this was an isolated thing, but what you're saying is this happened, let's say on a regular basis. I don't know how often we might have seen
Not
it.
often, but
Yeah, once in a
That's
everybody say there was nothing out there, but no, there was something out there. We don't know what it was. Swamp gas would be my guess, but
interesting.
just the way the humidity and the weather was.
yeah, the natural phenomenon. That's the way I look at
Phenomenon.
it.
Basically, it would probably be like, if anything, I would say either it would be exactly parallel with the switch tower, or it might have been a little bit up further. But no doubt in my mind, it would be like right here where the rails are right here. That's pretty much where the position was down by the switch tower.
So what you're saying is it is within almost like a stone's throw of the switch tower.
Yeah,
Pretty close.
yeah,
So if you're in the tower, then, I mean, I've heard it, Gerry Chrusz talked about it being in this direction from if you're in the tower,
Right.
but you're saying it could have been right in front of the tower or even east of the tower.
yeah. It definitely could have been, because this.
Okay.
I don't think this light has like a spot. It could because it showed up for me over at the switch tower. It showed up for him like further down the
The
line.
next story is from Mike Wikman, who will tell us a story about riding in a steam locomotive going westbound on the cutoff very fast. A story from his youth from back in either the 1940s or early 1950s. Here's that story.
Engineers, I could even name their names today. Ambrose Coughlin, he was an engineer out of Scranton that rode across the New Jersey cutoff. And that's where I first learned what the New Jersey cutoff was. And I used to ride the steam engines, which were the 1600 class. They were the 484 Northerns, or they had 5 Hudson locomotives, the 1150 class. And they had big 80-inch drivers, and I remember going across the cutoff with John Bleischer, an engineer out of Scranton, at over 100 mile an hour. Reason I'm saying over 100, the speedometer went to 90, and that's as far as it went, and it started to shake like this. And of course John had his watch out, and he would whisper in my ear. Now whispering on a steam locomotive going 100 mile an hour is almost deafening. He would yell in my ear. He would say, well, we're doing 103 mile an hour or whatever. But was over 100 mile an hour many times going across the cutoff.
Our next stop is just east of Johnsonburg. It's at the farm of Debbie Natyzak, who I met back in the 1980s, having to do with the cutoff. She was involved with Frelinghuysen Township, and it still is, as a matter of fact. Some very, very unusual occurrences take place on her farm, and on the cutoff next to her farm. Let's go to the video and hear from her about what she experienced back in those days. And tell us what happened over here on the cutoff, right behind us, where I'm pointing to that green tree there up on the cutoff.
In this area.
Tell us, give us a little bit of background of what happened and what you saw.
Again, it's probably around 7 o'clock in the evening. I walked past our living room window, and this is what I saw, these very bright lights in a string on top of the tracks. And they were there for quite some time. I would say, ooh, over 10 minutes, just sitting there. That's about all I could say about it. It was just very odd. And it wasn't a train, because it was just, nothing moved sideways. It wasn't moving anywhere, it just stayed stationary in one spot. And it just had these separate lights that spread apart, very bright.
Now, you went up there.
The next day.
And what did you see when you went up there?
Well, there were no trees at that time. Everything was just grass, and all I could find up there was just grass laid down in the one spot. There was nothing disturbed other than the fact that this grass, because the tracks were still up there, and but
yeah, the eastbound track, or
yeah,
what
the tracks
was the
were still there.
But there was a spot where there weren't any tracks, so it would have been on.
Yeah, it was even further off of that. Was more in the grassy area.
Okay. Okay.
So that and there was no burn marks, nothing. It was and it was an exact spot, pretty much where I saw it from my window.
But you're saying that the grass was
laid down.
Was laid down.
Yep.
Flattened. Okay. Now talking about stunning. Okay, the close encounter of the third kind.
Okay.
Tell us about that. How old are you? And then give us a little bit of background.
That's when I was 11. So I was born in 57. So 11 would be what?
68-ish, right?
68-ish.
Yeah.
So you're talking about this light over here, 67. So 68. And then that was in November. So they took my bike.
They took your bike.
I didn't see them take it, but my bike disappeared the next day. So I assume these little creatures that were about yay high with big heads that ran past the back of the house. 3 of them, probably the one in the front had the bike, because I didn't see the last one. I only saw the last one running by.
And you don't know where they came from?
That way. I don't know why they would go that way, but they went that way. So I don't know what was on that side. I was too scared to go look.
So how did you know that they were there? I mean,
I heard something running past the back of the house, because it's a ranch house. It's a big long run. And I thought, well, who's running behind my house? You know, it's like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Who's running behind the house?
Now, you're saying about this tall, so that would put them about 4 foot or
yeah, they
a
were
little bit
short.
more. Big head.
Big heads.
The body.
Short bodies. Had arms and little legs, and they wobbled. Like I wobble now.
So the body is what? Is it low to the ground in a sense? I mean, how?
The body's on the ground.
No, what? But how long are these legs? Because you're saying they're
not long.
So they're unusually short. I'll put it that way. So
not real short, but probably about, the body itself. I don't know. I don't remember seeing. That was just too striking to see the head. The head was big. That's the only thing that I never saw the face. So that was, I just saw the backs of them.
Coloration, texture. I mean, describe them.
It was. Everything was just the same color, like that flesh, not flesh tone, but more because it was gray. It was night at dusk, so it was like a grayish, maybe grayish blue. Okay. On a lighter end.
Because I don't know that we have any skeptics that are watching, but it seems to me that this isn't just a bunch of kids running around in Halloween costumes. No. Because the head part and the short leg.
But it was just too big of a head. Like I said, it's like a teardrop head. It was pretty big. Teardrop.
And it's not like a helmet or it was like
a whole big body form.
Of all the same in a sense, so you couldn't really There
was no distinction. I mean, everything was one. It's like if you're naked, just everything's one flowing skin.
So you don't get the sense that they were actually wearing some kind of suit or anything like that.
Nope.
And your bike disappeared.
And bike disappeared next day. So You tell that to whatever. But anyway, it was broken up. The bike was broken up, so.
What do you mean?
I could still, I wrecked it, but my dad banged it out so I could still ride it.
But it disappears. Is what
It disappeared. Who would want to take a bike that's bent up? That's what I'm saying.
So the last time you saw it was the day before or the day of this?
Probably the day before, because when you're a kid, that's all you do is ride your bike.
And then the next day it's
Gone.
It's gone. That's bizarre. I mean, it's a sort of like a souvenir.
I have no idea. You
No,
asked-
I'm
Well, I
not
have no
asking you.
idea.
It's sort of a rhetorical question. I mean, to me, it's sort of like, well, why? I mean, I'm thinking about in terms of the cutoff, for example. I can see the fascination if you're like, you want to say, an alien being. Why would you have an interest in a train? Well, I guess if it's a primitive, if you're.
But it's not so much a train as I'm saying this water. I mean, this area. And who knows how long or how many sightings there were here, because you have to be there to witness it.
Well, we're talking at least. Who knows how we're talking? Because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then there are others where we're talking about neighbors who we don't know. We're talking 6 and different people. It's not like you're seeing the one who's seeing all these sightings or these experiences. It's multiple people in this area.
Yeah, but different times, and pretty much the triangular ones are pretty close to each other in this time frame.
Okay.
Yeah.
But okay. All right. So if my inventory is correct without those which are question marks, because we don't know, people are not telling us, they're reluctant to give us details. But I have 2 close encounters of the first kind, 2 close encounters of the second kind, and 1 close encounter of the third kind. And that's not counting others that we don't have those details as to what they saw, what they experienced, that kind of thing. So yeah, I'd say this would qualify, definitely qualify as a hotspot. But there hasn't been anything since the 80s, then you're saying? That it's been
Well,
quiet.
if you publish this and put it out there, maybe you'll find somebody that, because we're getting up there in time and years, so who knows.
Well, I would be
If there
interested,
were
and almost in a sense I would appeal to the audience if you have any stories, if you live or lived in this area, and I say this area, anywhere along the cutoff, but in general, in the area of Sussex or Warren counties, and you've experienced something that's similar to what Debbie is describing, heck, contact us and we'll possibly talk to you, because it's I see a connection to the cutoff, but clearly there's more to it than
there's
just
more to
that. Now maybe that's a draw. I don't know.
I think it is a draw.
But,
Has to be.
But there's a few things that clearly there are. What the reasons are, I think it's too many sightings within a very relatively small area. To me, there has to be some kind of attraction here. What that is, well, you say the water. It could be a combination. Don't know. Okay, our next stop is within Frelinghuysen, actually at the station at Johnsonburg. One New Year's Eve, Larissa and I popped into the general store in Johnsonburg, not necessarily expecting to get any story, but as it turned out, we did. A story from Gerry Chrusz, who is the only living person today who saw a runaway of cement cars and a locomotive chasing them back in August of 1958. Here's that story. Now this would be before your time, but there's the story about the set of cars that got loose at Port Morris. I'm not sure if you know about it.
Yeah, it was the cement cars. I was up here at the time. We saw them go by.
Where were you at that time?
At the creamery up here, the picture I showed you there.
Oh yeah,
They
at Johnsonburg.
just got loose and started rolling. And they rolled and rolled and rolled till they got to the cutoff there, to the water gap, and they went too fast around the curve, and they all went down the drink there. I think they're still there. You went down there and scuba dive, because that cement got hard as a rock.
So you couldn't pull them up.
Put
Yeah.
them all. I think they're still there. I don't know, but
I mean, was this something that like you all of a sudden you happened to be there, and all of a
just
sudden,
happened to be there.
and
What
there,
the
there, there's
hell is
this.
Caboose. I don't know how many cars that had, but it had cement cars. And 5 minutes later, an engine going 100 miles an hour trying to catch it. Never caught up to it.
Oh, really? So there
They-
was it because there's that legend that the engine actually tried to catch, and I
The
kind of
engine
just.
caught it, yeah, because I saw that go by. Trying
Really?
to catch them, yeah.
But he tried to catch it, but he
Tried to
didn't.
catch it, never got up to it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So wow. I didn't. I always thought that was just like, a
An
big
engine
story.
was-
But
An engine was chasing. I saw the engine. I might have been 10 years old, but I saw the engine.
wow.
An old RS3.
Our next story takes place in Johnsonburg, which is in Frelinghuysen Township. It takes place in 1924. It was told to me by Mayor Charlie Rydell back in 1988, long before we started doing these videos on the cutoff. So you'll have to bear with me. You'll have to listen to my version of the story, which he told me, but it's at the exact spot on the cutoff where he told that story to me. So let's go to that video. Let's go to that spot in Johnsonburg. Here we are about between a mile and a half west of Johnsonburg Station to talk about probably one of the biggest supporters of the Lackawanna Cutoff during the dark days when it wasn't clear whether the state of New Jersey would acquire the line, whether the owner at that time who was proposing to rip up the embankments from the cutoff and cart it away for fill material. There were a number of towns which I went to gain resolutions of support from during the 1988-89 time frame. But when I came here to Johnsonburg, specifically Frelinghuysen Township, and met the mayor, there was something different about his level of support. His name was Charles Rydell, Charlie as everyone called him. And at that time, once again 1988 or so, he had been mayor for over 30 years, and he would continue on beyond that time as mayor for a few years. For a while, he was the longest serving mayor in New Jersey history. But at the time I met him, I really just couldn't put a finger on it. His level of support was several notches greater than anyone else's. Amongst any mayor that I met, I would say amongst any public official I met. But I just couldn't really figure it out. Why was that so? But at some point, we had a discussion. I think we had a phone call, and he asked me to come over here to his farm in Frelinghuysen Township. And the cutoff actually goes through, literally cuts or splits his farm in half. That way is towards Johnsonburg, this way is towards Blairstown. And he drove his truck right to this spot. It's a crossing. It would have been probably the only place in the cutoff which had a crossing, a road crossing that wasn't where there was a bridge or an underpass, where you literally could drive over the tracks. When he took me here, there were no tracks here. And he started to tell the story of not so much to explain why he was a big supporter, but it became clear once he told the story why he was. It was a dark night in 1924, cold night. I want to say December, probably about the same time of year as we are here with the snow flurries coming down. A freight train was coming west from the direction of Johnsonburg, which in those days there were no trees, so you could probably see the whole area around. The barn was on fire. It had caught fire somehow. It might have been a lantern, but somehow there was a fire in the barn. The freight train came west, saw the fire. They stopped the train at this location. The engineer runs out, the fireman as well. The engineer runs to the farmhouse. The fireman to the barn. They saved the barn. The animals in the barn, the cows, the horses, whatever, the pigs. I remember Mayor Rydell saying that they actually saved the family. And I was never really quite sure what he meant by that, but it might have been because financially it would have been a ruin, but not to mention that the barn and such would have gone up in flames. Of course, the train was here. Then he said that the fireman and engineer, of course, had to leave, and they stayed long enough to, just make sure everything that at least everyone was aware of what was going on, and then they tooted the whistle and off they went. But it was clear that the mayor had a special feeling about the railroad, even though it came through his property. That it had a special meaning to the family and to him personally. So that explained why he became such a big supporter. And when I came before Frelinghuysen, that it was a much different feeling. There was a personal feeling to it. And this particular trip that I had, this is now, 28 years ago it would be now, explained why Mayor Rydell had that special feeling in his heart for the railroad and the cutoff. Mayor Rydell died, it must be at least 10 years ago at this point, and but he would write a blog in the local paper, and this story also appeared there, from what I can recall. And he actually published a book with his memories of Frelinghuysen. And it's to me, it's like when I come back here, I feel like that here is, at least for one person who was a great supporter of the cutoff, this is the spot that really explains, very much about how a railroad can mean more than just a railroad to an individual person. And our next stop is in Blairstown, where a few years ago, Larissa and I, just on a whim, were recording there, and it just so happens that we ran into a gentleman by the name of Jim, whose mother, Marion, had a story about how that spot, or that area where we were, became known as Molasses Junction. And here's that story.
Years ago, there was a man who lived there, and they had something growing. I don't remember right now what it was. Rhubarb. I think it was rhubarb.
Now this is Molasses Junction, or the house
Yes.
over across the way, or
No, this side. There was a house on this side.
Oh,
Where that pile of logs is, that's part of the foundation.
oh, right there.
Yeah, on this side of the road.
Okay.
And some city slickers came and, according to the article I read, told the farmer that he could make molasses out of the rhubarb. And I don't know how I can't remember how how it goes, but he swapped the pair of horses for the rhubarb. Something, I know, I don't have it right. I know I don't. So just put that part out of your picture.
Well, the story I've heard, and the rhubarb actually sounds like it could be right. Somehow he, I guess you could say, got taken for a ride, or sort of kind of got fooled into this, because it wasn't his molasses business didn't turn out very well, is the way I understood. Is that true?
Yes. Anyway, the farmer got rid of his horses, or oxen, or whatever he had, in return for the recipe to make molasses. So that's why it's called Molasses Junction.
Okay. Because there are old photos which I was telling this gentleman, I don't know your name.
Jim. I'm
Jim?
sorry.
Jim? No, it's okay. I don't know your name.
Marion.
Marion.
And that's Alma. She doesn't live here. She's a Floridian.
Oh gosh. Well, a good time to be here. This time of
Yeah.
year, actually, as a matter of fact. There are old photos, which we were talking to Jim about, that from about 1910, let's say, which show that building and probably, I guess, that building that you're referring to over by the woodpile. This one, I presume, as well, because how old is this house?
It looks like it might be, except the roof line. The roof line is opposite. But there have been fires in this house years ago, so it's a possibility that the roof was put on at a different angle.
Okay.
But across there, behind the stone house, there used to be a hotel.
Over
Right
behind
behind this stone house.
behind the stone house, really?
And the men that worked on the railroad, putting the railroad in, lived there. That was there.
During the time of the construction.
Yes.
Oh, really? Because there's stories with that they used to charge, and this is now 100 and almost 110 years ago, that they were charging like $2 or $3 a night, which apparently was, I don't know if in this particular, but some of the hotels in the area were charging that much a night, which apparently was a lot. I don't know if they did or not, we wouldn't know, but that's interesting. I didn't no idea that there was a hotel there.
Yeah. And that stone house was like an office for the railroad company.
Really?
That's what I heard.
So they use it. We don't know if it wasn't built specifically for the railroad, or it might have been there before.
It might have been there before.
Okay. Okay.
But I'm not an old resident here, so I'm not sure that I have all the stories.
Well, can I ask you when you moved here?
1960.
Okay, so you would remember trains up on.
Yes.
Is it? I would say, was it noisy, or did you hear them, or are they kind of like what would you?
After a while, you don't hear them.
Yeah, it's
In
just
the
like the
beginning.
cars going through the tunnel blowing their horns. Everybody said to me, doesn't it bother you? I said, no, I don't hear it anymore. I get immune to it.
Yeah, I grew up next to the tracks as well, and after a while, you really. I remember one time having to, because for a couple of years I commuted to school by train, and I was so oblivious to the trains going past. There had been a snowstorm, and I hadn't heard a train. So I called up the local train station, which it was like maybe about a 10-minute walk to go there, and I asked the station master, "Are the trains running?" And if he had been looking at me, I probably would have said, "What are you talking about?" And of course the trains are running today, but yeah, I didn't hear them. It was one of those things. And I was as close as you are, if not, well, even closer. Only that they're down below instead of up here. That's why I'm wondering, because if they're way up there, I'm wondering if the sound is different than it would be that if the trains were right down below, right here.
I never thought of that.
I wonder.
Well, I could remember,
There's a
it was a
fly
long
here.
time ago, but I can remember there's a grade, and that you could hear off in the distance because the train would be laboring.
Oh, they go up,
the
yeah.
grade.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, we just got used to it because it was here. We lived here, and that's the way it was.
And you don't remember the passenger trains so much. Maybe they weren't as loud, perhaps. Maybe they just. I'm wondering because they ran passenger
trains because we had relatives in New York City and they came up here.
Oh, they did?
Came to
Really?
the station that's over there on right, the route 5. Is that 520?
Where on
The number of the route?
521.
519 or whatever.
Yeah.
Where the radio station used to
521. Yeah, over Hope Blairstown Road. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
So you picked them up and really, where were they coming from? I'm curious.
They lived on, right in the city. I don't remember.
Oh, New York City then. Okay.
Yeah.
So they had to go to Hoboken and then. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Huh. Well,
28th Street. Over a man's clothing store was pretty well known. I can't remember the name of it. Do you remember where George and Mary lived?
They lived over Barney's,
Barney's.
7th Avenue.
Okay.
Yeah, that was my godfather.
so coming out here must have been like coming out into like the wilderness.
Out in the boondocks.
It seemed to take forever too. When we were kids, well, our mom and dad used to come out here before we were born. And Marion's in-laws, how many generations does it go back?
My husband's grandmother bought this house, and it was already in the farmhouse,
Really?
and we inherited it. So we're real happy here.
So this house then goes back several generations?
I
Then?
couldn't find out the date the house was built. I have deeds from property owners way back, but nothing mentions the building.
And my great grandmother had, according to Mom, had goats and chickens running in and out of this place.
She had a goat. And it had kids, so she had the baby goats running around inside the house.
Really? That must have been a mess, or potentially. Oh. Well, that's wow. So this was just a serendipity type of thing because we were just about ready to pack up, and I know you were going to start your lawn.
Yeah, I ran out of gas actually, and I saw you over there talking to your daughter, and I said, I can't start the lawnmower now because he's not going to hear her. And, so I just waited, and then I was like, I got real curious why you were filming over
Because
there.
I told Larissa I saw you with the gas can, and I figured, okay, you ran out of gas, but it's only a matter of time before you start up. So I figured we better do this real quick before because we're doing a video, not this one so much we didn't have a problem with, but our previous one we had several different places we went to. The first one we had a train that interrupted us, which wasn't a bad thing because you're doing a train video. The second one, I'm trying to think what the interruption was there. One way we had a dog, and I'm trying to remember what the third one was, where we were interrupted by, I forgot, but it was one of those things where you had, it can be any number of things that interrupt you. Oh, I know, it was the bicyclist. We were on a trail, and the bicyclist almost ran me over when I'm in front of the camera. I see him coming at me, and I was like, do I go this way or that way? Because he didn't. Fortunately, it turned out okay. But yeah, but this is great because now you filled in a part of the story that I was telling in front of the camera, but I didn't have the whole story either. So it sounds like we'll go with it. I mean, if it's rhubarb recipe, sounds good to me. Sounds like it's could be.
In fact, my mother would spend her summers with me, and she dug out the rhubarb and planted it in the backyard. No, I don't know what happened to it, but
I think I mowed it over. I just kept mowing it until it disappeared.
oh, is that what happened?
So was there a lot of rhubarb growing around here? Or
Yeah, there was-
No, there must have been a garden
Okay.
with that house.
Okay, the next story isn't really specific to any one part of the cutoff. This is the story, it's a sad story, but it's one told by Bob Bahrs and John Sobotka when I interviewed them about their being on the trains that removed the tracks from the cutoff. And so we'll hear from them as how that went and that was like back in the summer and early fall of the year 1984. Trains work like from like beginning to end. I mean, at the very beginning, you're dealing with the train's taking up rail at the western end of the line.
Well, it was funny because, not funny, I remember reading that the abandonment notice was actually in the newspaper. And I was working Dover, and Bob was also working Dover on another job, and I pointed out to you that the notice was actually out from Conrail. And I guess there was, I'm going to say maybe 60 days or from that point that basically the company could start ripping the railroad up. And I think I told you about that. And so we knew it was coming.
Yeah.
We just, you know, and that, I think that was summer.
You had to be on the Coursen Road Extra list then,
as a
because he got called for the train, the very first
train.
rail train. I think probably an Allentown crew brought it to Port Morris.
They brought it to Port Morris.
Okay, so the first morning that the Coursen Road crew would get it to actually go out on the cutoff via the west leg of the Y was John. And I remember talking to John that morning on the phone, and John was talking to the M&W guys, and they were saying, oh yeah, they're meeting in Washington, or was it Philadelphia as we were speaking, whether or not this is actually going to happen. Well,
Yeah.
obviously it happened.
Yeah.
And, you know, they shoved the train all the way to the Delaware River Bridge. And
Well, yeah, we ran up to Greendale.
up to Greendale, yeah,
But,
right around there.
but what had happened was before that summer beginning, they started bringing the what you call it, the switch heater, the blower. Start melting the snow off the rail because the cutoff was full of snow, and they actually got rid of the snow on the rail so they can come up with the spike puller. And the spike puller would probably pull out of a section of rail, he would probably pull so many spikes, but he would leave like every third or fourth tie still spiked. The rest of the spikes were taken out. So just to get them prepared. So they started basically from the river and started working east. So that winter before the summer of demise, you could see it was coming. And like I said, I got called for I was the brakeman on the job, and I think it was Jimmy Wharton was the conductor, and I don't remember who the engineer was. And it was bittersweet because we knew it was coming, and like Bob says, we were.
Oh yeah, there was guys in Hoboken that were really mad at me for working those jobs. Oh, you're ripping up our cutoff.
Yeah.
Well, if I don't do it, somebody else is going to do it.
Of course.
All right, because I'm doing it doesn't mean. Now, what I did do is try to photograph as much as I could for posterity, but yeah. If I didn't work it, somebody else was going to work
it. Was sad, and like I said, I don't have the engine numbers and all that stuff, but it was sad. Like Bob said, we were waiting for that call from the governor's office, to stay the execution.
First rail train, June 19th, which was a Tuesday.
June 19th. Okay.
And
is that the first one you were on, or was that the first one?
I was on. Yeah.
Very first one.
Wow. Okay.
Out of Fort Morris.
And we deliberately, and I'm being honest about it, we deliberately tried to drag our feet a little bit because we were waiting for that phone call. I mean, we've tried to find everything possible. I tried to find everything possible to slow that train down another minute or two, because there was a lot. You got to look at what that railroad actually hauled and how important it was at one time. To see something as brilliant as it was to be ripped up. The track supervisor said to me, he said, if we were going to put this track back into service, and how long was it furloughed? I mean, basically dormant.
About 5 years.
He said even in being dormant for 5 years, they would have made that railroad at least 25 miles an hour. So that's how good that railroad was maintained up until that period. So we like I said, honestly, we found everything wrong with that train to slow it up. The dog ate the homework. I forgot my lunch. I got to make a phone call. I have to go to the bathroom. The engine's not working right or something like that. Just waiting. We were hoping. I know Morris County was talking about somebody riding to the rescue with a check or something, and it was,
there was so much going on behind the scenes.
July
And
5th, Thursday, second rail train.
so. But
So the first rail train would have been loaded up with rail, presumably.
well,
Is
not
that
necessarily, because
Really?
what we did was we brought the train up to Greendale. And but first, we knew we were going to run into problems. Was once you left Port Morris, you come up to a sweeping curve, and Bob probably knows a little better what I'm talking about. Somebody had removed about 300 or 400 ties from beneath the rail for landscaping purposes. And what Conrail had to do was actually safety tie that piece of railroad. Basic safety tie is one tie every 3 or 4 feet.
By Westport Morris.
Yeah. And basically just to get the train over. So it looked like you were going over a Lionel track. It was just enough to hold the gauge, and you had to walk the whole rail train over that. So, and I think typically the rail train was about 28 flat cars. And they're 3-tiered. So you had to walk this whole menagerie over this. So that, of course, we said, let's drag our feet a little bit more on this, just to slow it up a little bit. We got up to Greendale, of course, the interlock. What they had done was, before we came, they purposely went and took all the signal, the maintainers' locks off all the interlocking signals, boxes, whatever. So they were heavily vandalized at that point. The interlocking at Greendale, of course, not working. So we pulled the train up, cut the locomotives off, and the switches to get around the train had to be manually. They were controlled switches. We had to manually get them over to get the locomotive around to the east end of the train. And then from that point, from Greendale, we shoved up to the bridge on the Delaware. So
when you get down to the bridge, now I guess you've done as much delaying as you possibly can. Somebody has to go out there and what? Do you actually go out with blowtorches, or you just take the last pieces of rail and disconnect the joints, or how does that work? I'm curious.
Well, once basically we got up to where they wanted us to stop the train. So, and basically we applied all the handbrakes and we tied it down for the night. They already started pulling the spikes behind us towards the river bridge. So the next morning, the actual operation of pulling the rail came up. So, and basically it's a cable system that comes from one end of the train, runs through the cars, and basically you're cabling it. They'll cut a hole on the side of the rail and put a hook on it and just start pulling it up. So you pull up one side, they reset, and then they pull the other side up. Now, once they pull that section of up, like I said, it fits on 28 cars, and each car was 50 foot, so you're talking
Quarter mile.
Yeah, quarter mile they'd be pulling up.
So you have to measure that out before.
Well, they would have it, and then once they pulled up those sections of rail, they'd have you pull up the train, another 28 car lengths or so. You stop it, and then they start pulling the next length up.
Now, in theory, that could be done pretty quickly, but this will take all the way until October to get all the way to the end. And is it like these trains are happening on a regular basis, or is there any kind of breaks?
5 days a week.
Yeah, but you would work the train, but once it got loaded, the train may sit for a while before they actually took it back to Allentown, and I went to Harrisburg to Lucknow, I think it was. Because what they were going to do was, if it was stick rail or whatever, they were going to cut the stick rail off, the end of the rails, because what happens over time on the joints, your rail starts to bend down. So at Lucknow, what they would do is chop off those bad ends and actually weld it. Now, supposedly all this rail was going to go into a yard rehab project somewhere on Conrail. So
yeah, because there's at least, I don't know if we call it rumors, but there was stories going around that it was urgently needed for some reason. And
not necessarily. I'll be honest with you, no. Like I said,
those were stories.
Yeah, because really, like I said, once the train was loaded, if they didn't have the crew to move it from Port Morris to Washington to Allentown, or from Allentown to Harrisburg, that train might sit for days and days. It wasn't top priority. Now,
I just remembered something that the mornings we talked, from Morristown. At the time, there was a guy named Tucker Lampkin, and he would show up at Morristown every morning and go in and use Ben Friedland's office all day. And this happened like a couple weeks before the first rail train, and right through that, where we knew he was making these phone calls to buy the cutoff. And then there was all sorts of rumors, well, they want 21 million, or they want 19 million, or they want 30 million, and they're close, but they're not jiving, and okay. And I don't know if he was a banker or a lawyer. Okay,
He was a banker.
He was a lawyer. Okay, or a banker. A banker.
He was a banker.
He's a banker, and
Oh, go ahead.
he was apparently he was trying to do this on the side slyly on behalf of CSX. They were trying.
That's true.
They
Yes.
were trying to get that as a way to get into New York, and obviously he failed. And the funny part of the article is when he was all done and he didn't show up anymore, he left Ben Friedland with a huge phone bill. I'm sorry, I interrupted you, but I just remembered that. He was there, he'd be there like several days a week for hours and hours in Ben Friedland's office trying to make deals on buying the cutoff.
And there was rumors that the Ben and the M&E Railroad were going to operate.
Yeah, and if that happened, then I would have stayed with the M&E and all that.
There was, in other words, it would be like a ghost company that they'd be working for. So there was rumors. I know you mentioned something about people putting spikes back into the track and all that. We never seen that.
You never saw that? Okay.
No, they were still pulling spikes out. I'm thinking back. I was driving here. I was thinking back though too. Is we had a lot of issues with locomotives up there being vandalized, and in some cases I think it was just more than the local kids, okay, that were doing it, because some of the damage to the engines were very, very deliberate. You remember that? I mean, we would.
That's what I was curious
The
about.
obvious one was the day we left them on the west portal of Roseville Tunnel,
Yeah.
because it was a Friday, and John was on and I was on, and we said, next Monday will be the last train through this tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we need to get some pictures here.
Yeah.
Okay, we parked the engines right at the west portal of Roseville Tunnel. When we came back Monday morning, fire extinguishers, flares and fusees, windows were broken, spray paint, the engines were a mess. And I remember having to call the dispatcher and telling him this. And he made some kind of remark of, we're using more engines to rip up this cutoff than we are running trains. You know, it was kind of, he was annoyed about that. Now they had to, meaning Conrail had to come up with 2 more engines somewhere, get them up to Port Morris, and get the old engines out.
Yep.
And that
They
could
weren't
take
operating?
literally days because,
Really?
you know, whether they came from Oak Island or Allentown, then that was a separate crew that might be qualified as far as Netcong, might be qualified into Port Morris, but then they weren't qualified to go out on the cutoff, which was Croxton Road area jobs. So we would have to get those engines come down, grab the engines that you couldn't start, take them back to Port Morris, set them over,
And then go back.
and then the Allentown crews would have to then maybe the next day jitney up to Port Morris and get those engines and get them out. So
So this is all wasting days of, you know.
Well,
yeah.
The train wasn't always constant. Like, you would have a crew, you do so much. They may not have a crew for that train for a couple of days. It sat out in the middle of nowhere. Because, right, Bob? Like, you have enough people, so other jobs would be full. I remember meeting the crew. We would meet at Port Morris, and I live in the Pacon, and the crew would drive out themselves. I'd go back home. And then around 11 o'clock in the morning, I would have their lunch order. I'd go buy them lunch and go meet them someplace out there and give them, bring them lunch, coffee, or whatever it was. And there was times that they would leave me with the train. They would take my car back to Port Morris, and I would be on the train myself. And it's not legitimate, but when they say pull the train up another 28 cars, I was the only one there. I pulled it up to another 28 cars. So there was times that we had to drive back and forth with the with the track department.
Sometimes if we knew where the train was, we would drive out to, like, say, Andover or
whatever it was,
Rydell.
Yeah.
Okay, and we'd park, and the track guys would make sure that we got back to our car that evening.
Yeah.
Okay, at the end of the day. Or if the train started at Port Morris and we left our cars at Port, the track department would see to it that somehow somebody would take us back to our car. Or one of us would drive with the train, drive out to where we were going
and start from
and be the rubber wheels for the day, and at the end of the day be the rubber wheels to get the whole crew back. Nobody knew where we were. Nobody knew, nobody cared other than just get that rail ripped up. You would report to the dispatcher in the morning, you'd say you're such and such a crew. You would call, I think, the Lehigh Line dispatcher.
And they would kill us.
And they would write your name down on some dispatcher sheet.
That you were up there.
That you were up there. And up there was somewhere in North Jersey.
I had no idea where they were.
So you guys were out of radio contact, or was there any?
Oh yeah, there was nobody talked to us up there. We were under.
So when they used to say we don't know where the train is, they literally didn't know where the train was.
The track.
I mean, they knew where you were.
The track supervisor would know where you were, but the dispatcher wouldn't know where you were.
Okay, and he didn't care.
He didn't really care.
He wasn't running any trains against you or around you or through you.
It was just out of service. Yeah,
okay.
It was out of service.
He just had to literally write on his train sheet that you were on duty that day, and that's.
And I did the same thing with Bob. I was taking a lot of slides up there also too. If I brought my camera up, and it's sad some of the places that you take that you would say the saddest part was I took a picture of an SD40 and a caboose sitting at Blairstown station, and that was the last that night when we tied up, and I said to myself, tomorrow it's all gone. There won't be no more engine at Blairstown. Yeah. You know,
we did get the pictures at Roseville Tunnel.
Yeah,
we got night shots.
Yep.
And they came out well.
Yeah.
And then the next Monday morning,
it was gone.
It was the last train through the cutoff or through the tunnel, and I took pictures of it coming through the tunnel. I got pictures. We stopped the train. And it was Jimmy Giordano, myself.
Yeah, that was it.
And I don't know if it was Wharton or who it was, but we stopped the train. I got pictures with the tunnel there and the engine, and. I thought that would be the last train ever to go through that tunnel. Some year now, there's going to be a transit train that will go through that tunnel.
But again, I have fond memories of it. We used to get heavier thunderstorms during the summer through there, and I remember it was the Lackawanna gods punishing us for what we're doing to their sacred ground, and black snakes. Because black snakes are harmless, they don't bite you or anything, but there was always black snakes in the ties. And I remember one some trackmen I guess joke on their supervisor, their foreman, gathered a bunch of black snakes and put them in his truck. So when he opened up the door, it was like Indiana Jones. I hate snakes, and they were under the seat and all that stuff, and everybody got a big laugh out of that. He didn't think it was funny, but you would do that. Most of the trackmen that worked up there were out of Scranton. A lot of them were
They were former Erie Lackawanna or Lackawanna men that worked out of the Bloom or from around Scranton, and there was no work up there, so they would literally roam. And they would come down here, and they'd stay the week down here, and then they'd go home on weekends back to Bloomsbury.
A lot of them were big Scranton boys, I'll tell you.
So as you get towards the end, I know that eventually you do finally rip up the last piece. Now, Bob, I know there's that iconic photo, I guess, with your son on the locomotive. Are you on the? Are you? Either you guys on the last train?
John made the sign.
You made the sign.
I made that at
John made that sign.
6:30 in the morning of the last day. I had a piece of cardboard.
So the world can thank John for that.
October 5th.
And he put that on the engine, and he told me about, tomorrow they're going to take the train west, and that'll be it. Yeah. And miraculously, I was off or got done late in the day or something, and grabbed my son, and we went up, and I took a picture of him on the engine. And those are the things that, you're really happy you did.
Yeah.
I mean.
And it was right around that date also that I lost my mother-in-law. So.
And the other thing I remember is that I think it was 5960 and 5962 were GP8s.
Yeah.
And they were the two ex-Lackawanna Jeeps that Conrail had sent through the GP8 program.
Yeah.
And we got the 5962,
Yeah.
which was not a Lackawanna engine. And I thought we missed it by one number, you know. One number, it would have been an ex-Lackawanna engine going through the tunnel for the last time, and coming off the cutoff for the last time.
Yeah, because they originally took the railroad up to Port Morris itself up by the tower, and then the last move we made was towards the west end of the Y, coming around the Y. And I remember there's a whole group of people, locals, came out and took a number of pictures, and some people asked my name and stuff like that. It's all lost, I guess, but we had the engine around the Y there, so there were some pictures taken. So.
There's a photograph out there of Bob, you're on the front of the locomotive coming through Port Morris Yard, and the grass must be about 3 or 4 feet high.
Yeah.
You can't see the tracks or anything, but you're on the front of the locomotive and the train's coming through the yard.
Yeah.
I presume it was the rail train, of course.
Yeah, I took some pictures of Westport Morris shoving out there. I don't know, one of the trains coming and going. Jimmy Wharton was in the picture, and somebody else.
This is a Mike Del Vecchio shot, though. I think.
And it was the same way. The weeds by that time were pretty high. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, did either of you gentlemen ever get to actually run or ride a train on the cutoff?
Me, no.
I hired in '77, and I was working out of Hoboken in passenger service, but I was on the extra board there, and it was a Saturday night, and I called up, and there was nothing showing, and I was second or third or four times out, and nothing showing, and I actually went out on a Saturday night, and it wasn't till like, I don't know, Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, I bump into Paul Bohr, and he says, "Where were you Saturday night?" I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, you missed a call." Well, I didn't miss a call. I didn't get dropped because it was a job I didn't have to take. But they called me for light engines to Scranton. And that was my chance to have ridden
All the way up?
All the way across.
Oh.
And I was out. And it was a case where the crew caller didn't know that they were going to call light engines to Scranton when I talked to him earlier in the evening. And it was with Paul Bohr, who was a great guy and a quasi-rail fan, and you know, we could have talked all the way to Scranton, and it was a one-way and deadhead back, you know, jitney back, and
well, I mean, that's, you never know. I mean,
Well, ironically, when was the next? Then was it 2 years ago, 3 years ago? The first rail trains came back for the cutoff, and I happened to be the engineer on the first train, bringing the first and second train.
that's 2011.
Yeah.
It's, right around. It was in December of 2011.
Yeah.
and that rail is still rusting away. No flanges on it.
No, that's right.
No flange wear has been found on that rail yet.
Yeah.
It's in perfect condition.
So it's gone full circle to bring it back, you know. And you took a picture. Remember that the first train we came up, we pulled it in the Port Morris yard.
I don't remember, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, because then the New Jersey Transit pushed it onto the cutoff, and they emptied off all the rail there, which you're pointing out.
Mm-hmm.
Much of which is still there. Some of it's been laid out there, about 4 miles, but there's still quite a bit that's still at Port Morris.
Mm-hmm.
Our next to last stop is here at the very, very end of the cutoff, the western end of the cutoff. You can see the Delaware River here, Slateford Junction over in this area. The story that we're going to hear from Mike Del Vecchio has to do with a train that's going too fast and going towards a curve that's off the map here, a sharp curve, and a train that's going too fast and a sharp curve are a recipe for bad things to happen, and that's going to be our next story. Kalangetti, who I've always called Kalangetti. That's
Angetti is his name.
yeah. The infamous derailment, because he flew off the rails at Point Gap.
Number 9, the paper train.
What's the story behind that? I mean, he basically went too fast and
He was trying to. He was 3 hours. He was trying to make up 2 hours on a 3-hour schedule. And
what was his ultimate destination?
Scranton. It was the paper train, number 9, terminated Scranton. Paper trains run late at night, and they stop and they make all kinds of stops to pick up newspapers and drop off newspapers. All right, so somehow it was running late. I believe it left Hoboken late and just got later. And yeah, it's the rule of the railroad. Late trains only get later. And so he's trying to make up time. I hate to say this, but apparently he was a known drinker. So I don't know if that had anything to do with anything. But the tipping speed on that curve, according to the federal reports, was 70 miles an hour. So he had to be doing faster than that. The pointed gap curve. Now, I got to interview Andy Hopper, who was the train master in that territory that night. He got a call. He was at Portland Station. He got a call. Slateford said it went by at this time, and East Stroudsburg hasn't seen it. Go see if you can find it. So Hopper had a short fuse, as reported by many trainmen. And Hopper, about that, Hopper always told me, I was firm, but I was fair.
Heard that before.
Right. So, Hopper said he got in his car, mad because you interrupted him from whatever he was doing. And having been a train master myself, you know, I never got that mad at something, but, you know, shit, what's going on, you know? So he drives past Slateford Tower, and he's motoring up 611, or today's 611. He sees the back of the train, and then he's going around the curve. He sees the other end of the train. There's no engine, and he's thinking, "Oh, is that an eastbound?" Forgetting that he just saw the back of the train, you know. So he turns around, and he sees the 4 or 5 cars sitting there, you know. And he climbs on the train. He finds a conductor on the floor. He says, "What the hell happened?" And he goes, "I don't know. The air dumped." And he's thinking. At first, he's thinking, "Would they cut and run for water or something?" But again, East Stroudsburg didn't see them. So he's looking at the ballast, and he doesn't see any marks in the ballast. So he's not sure what had happened yet. But when the conductor he helps the conductor up, and he says the air dumped, and you don't see any evidence of a derailment. He's trying to figure out what happened. There's no glass. There's no evidence that anything happened. It took a while to figure out that the engine tipped over. What I found out looking at the federal reports, because there were fatalities, the engineer and fireman died. Looking at the federal reports of it, an engine in a milk car went over. There was a wooden milk car, a GARX milk tank car with wood sides, also went into the river. Getting back to the Steamtown story, some diver said he saw evidence of a steam engine down in the creek, so I go researching that, find evidence, find a New York Times story. There's pictures in New York Times of cables. They pull the engine out, you know. Rod Durkee said a negative he took of the tender sitting on track. They already pulled the tender out and was sitting on track, so the engine's been retrieved and scrapped. The number plate for that engine is sitting in the Railroad Museum of Pennsylvania. It was given to them in the Tom Tabor collection. So the engine was scrapped after that. It was never put back in service. By then, this was 1948. Steam was being retired. Diesels were showing up. You know, the F3 showed up in 48, 46, FTs in 45. So, you know, it was already the end of steam. They didn't bother restoring the engine. They just scrapped it. So, but that was the story. The federal reports, you can look up the US DOT reports and read everything about it. You know, they did the investigation.
It was foggy that night for some reason. And then, if I remember right, it was a mist or something like that.
I don't remember weather being an issue. I was just reading, you know, as I'm going over in my head what it was in there. It was just the thing that impressed me most was the milk car went off with it. So it was not just the locomotive and the tender, because water in the tender sloshes. So you know, yes, there's baffles in there to prevent that, but still, you had a tender full of water or half full of water. The locomotive, boiler full of water, tender, half full of water, and a milk car, westbound milk was empty, so it's an empty car. They went so clean off the rails that there were no marks in the ballast, so he had to be moving, and that's what impressed me most about that report.
Well, the thing is, other than, let's say, what you're saying is...
And there are pictures in the Steamtown collection of the wreck, of this site.
Yes, I've seen those, and
I've printed those. Yeah.
But what's kind of strange is that unless he was just basically totally blasted, how would he have missed the fact that he went over the Delaware River Viaduct, which of course would be you would know that now you're within a couple miles of that speed restricting curve.
Could he have been asleep? I doubt it. You can't sleep in a steam locomotive. Not running faster. Every steam locomotive.
But what would the fireman be doing? Would the fireman be twiddling his thumbs while this thing's doing 80 miles an hour?
The fireman is being shaken to death. That engine he was on, 1136, was a hand bomber. So this fireman's working his tail off to keep that fire going. The engineer. Now, every steam locomotive is balanced for one speed. The eccentric, the counterweights are a set weight. The crank, the stroke, and the dimension of the crank is in one place. It doesn't adjust. So that was a 74-inch driver Pacific. Its balancing speed was around 55 or 60. So he's doing 70 plus. That engine is shaking like crazy at that speed. So I guarantee the engineer's not asleep, and the fireman is bouncing around like mad, and the fireman's sitting in his seat doing his thing. So now the curve coming off the Water Gap Bridge is very well compensated. It's got a lot of bank on it. All right, so I don't think he had any resistance on that curve whatsoever at that speed.
But wouldn't it have? Wouldn't have it, like, in a sense, notified him that, I'm coming up on, because...
Well, he's qualified on that line. He knows every inch of that railroad. Every engineer knows every inch of that railroad.
So what's he doing? Is he like committing suicide?
He had to think he could get away with it. He must have gone almost that fast before and figured he'll go faster. It's I don't know. We're in a cab.
I know. We're speculating. I mean, he was supposedly known as a speed demon. I mean,
yeah, and yes, he was a fast runner. And he was well known for that. I talked to many engineers who knew him and mentioned that he was a fast runner. And he had some vices in his life too. So, and again, he was trying to make up. He was like 2 hours late on a 3-hour run. So I guess, was he thinking he could put it on time?
What happened to a locomotive? I mean, if let's say I don't know how late you started off this trip, but if you start late, are you going to be penalized back in those days? Are you going to be penalized as a locomotive engineer because you didn't arrive on time when you left 2 hours late, or God only knows how much, from the beginning? What was going to happen to him?
I tried to get at a hopper how that sort of worked, and
they couldn't have expected him to be like running so fast that he ending up in the river.
Even though it was sort of a competitive thing to get your stuff in on time, but I don't know. There's no real answer why he was trying to go that fast. And again, the speed on that curve was 35, and it was compensated too, but it's a tight curve, and he just went airborne.
Well, if he was doing 75 miles an hour, that's not surprising.
Yeah.
How fast could that engine actually go, though, is the question. You know,
That thing could do 100. I mean, it was shaking to death. But 74, 79s, I forget how big the drivers were. 1136 was one of the tall drivered engines. So it could get a roll on if it wanted to.
But it was,
and who knows what he was doing on the cutoff. But yeah, it would be a rough ride because it's way above its balance speed. But boys will be boys, and you and I have both talked about engineers. People have been in cabs and then just doing 100 on the cutoff.
Right.
But the Hudsons were 80-inch drivered engines, and they were balanced for that. They were designed for fast running. We always kind of make fun of the Lackawanna people buying Hudsons because Lackawanna was a mountain railroad, and Hudsons are, that kind of speed. You're doing flat track. You're not doing that in the mountains.
Well, I said there were certain places you could do it, but overall it probably
but not
was,
a lot of it.
No, it was probably an impractical thing to have those.
The cutoff was one of the few places where an engine like that could stretch its legs.
Yeah.
Climbing a Poconos definitely not. Once you get up at a Clark Summit and go west, and you're up on that shelf. Yeah, you could sail up there. And you get to Binghamton, and then when you get west of Binghamton, you're pretty good for a little while till you get to Cohocton and Gibson, and then you're up into the hills again.
Yeah, Mike Wikman did talk about going over the cutoff over 100, but he said that
Tabor told me that too.
But the speedometer only went up to 90, so they'd have to take out their pocket watch to be able to determine how fast they go. We're here at the Coursen House between Johnsonburg and Blairstown. There's quite an interesting history that comes with the house, and I have the owner of the Coursen House give us a little brief history of this property, which is quite interesting because the bridge you just saw also plays into the property and the changes that have occurred since or because of the cutoff being built. Philip, you own this structure. How long ago did you actually move here?
We purchased this home in 2020 in the midst of COVID, and have been living here ever since and renovating it.
So you're not originally from this area. You're from
New York City.
So this is quite a change for you. Now, having come here, I guess you somehow developed an interest in finding out some of the history, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you found.
Absolutely. I'm very fond of old things, and something like this, which I was told is built in the 1770s. It's possibly older than our country, which fascinated me. And when I saw the home, I decided to buy it. And as soon as I did, started searching around to see who might have built something like this, because if this was in fact built in the 1770s and it's not exactly a small house, it would have taken a lot of money and time and effort, and not to mention you'd have to get the stone quarried somewhere and brought over here to build a house of this size. But this house was built by the Moravians, which were a religious sect from Central Europe, which is Moravia, the modern day, a part of modern day Czech Republic. They are the ones who settled in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and then some of them came here to New Jersey and settled and founded Hope, the village. When you go to Hope, you will see similar homes all over the place, and this is their distinct style of building homes. If you ever go online and search for Moravian house, you will see photographs of very similar looking structures wherever they may be. So I am still learning about who lived here in the past 100 years and what was done to this house, and I'm slowly renovating it, but that is the brief history of this home.
So the Corson name is associated with this house. I don't know if that was the original owner or the owners that when the cutoff was being built 1908, 9, 10, and 11 through here. It was, I believe, Ann Corson who owned this property. And in fact, it's a kind of a cut here, but certainly once you go beyond the bridge, there's even a deeper cut. And that was referred to as Corson Cut. And then as you go beyond that, closer towards Blairstown, there's Corson Fill. So the name Corson is quite closely associated with the cutoff and is memorialized because of the fact that this property here was originally owned by where we stand right now was Corson property. Of course, now it's part of the railroad for the Lackawanna cutoff. Another interesting part is that where we're standing, and we've been here before. We've done what I kind of jokingly referred to as a archaeological expedition, and the last time we tried. Here we are on the bridge over the cutoff on Silver Lake Road. Technically this is Frelinghuysen Township, but we'll call it close enough to Blairstown. We're really not that far from Blairstown. We're here to look for two things. We'll show you a photograph, or a couple of photographs, of this location from the 1920s. Essentially, we're going to see if we can locate the foundation of the section house, which is off on the left side of the cut over here. And then down below, we'll see, I don't know if we can or not, but we'll look and see if we can find where the actual Lackawanna, which was written in the side of, in a whitewash, on the side of the cutoff, literally on rocks over here, right below this bridge, that the section house workers who took care of this particular section of the cutoff would keep up, and sort of as a sign, and just sort of a sign of pride. So, in any case, here we go on our short archaeological expedition. And the last time we tried that, it was a very cold day. Today is not so bad at all, but when we were here, and we basically failed on every possible attempt to try to find different things. And I know you've tried some things too. You were able to find a bunkhouse, which we'll show you in a little bit, is over yonder. But there were originally 3 tracks here, actually 4, but the 4th track would have been just somewhere around here going off the westbound siding, and then there was an eastbound siding, and then there was east and westbound main line in between. The only thing that's really left here is part of the, would have been the eastbound, or well, it was only 1 track after 1958. Anyway, but be that as it may, so this area of the right-of-way is very wide because of that. As you go in that direction, and I'm just going to wander over past Larissa here, and you can follow me, Philip, and we're not going to go all the way over here, but the Lackawanna sign that has been seen in some photographs by, I guess would be Jack Belay, was photographed in some of these photographs, was over here on the side of the hill near the Silver Lake Road Bridge. I haven't had any luck finding it, and Philip, you're shaking your head. You haven't had any luck either.
None.
Which is maybe not totally surprising, given that the fact that it's been probably gone for the better part of 80 or 90 years. We don't know exactly when they stopped painting the Lackawanna in big bold letters over here. The other thing, which I mentioned before, is that Silver Lake Road, which we found when we were inside looking at the maps, was moved because of the cutoff. Originally, and maybe you can kind of roughly point, and we'll show you a photograph of this. We're going to go back. When the cutoff came through, they moved the road to the other side of what are called the Coursen House, but the original road went very close to the Coursen house on that side.
Yeah, thanks to your maps, I confirmed a suspicion I had, which was that the original road was not to the left of the house, but rather to the right. You can look at images from 19th century atlases for Warren County and see exactly the same thing, that the road came on the right side, which kind of begged the question, how's the house on the left side? But thanks to your maps, I now am absolutely certain that the original road, which was, I guess, a dirt road, literally came this way and literally came between the house and the barn that stood right across. That's awesome.
And we think it perfectly aligns with your driveway.
And it perfectly aligns with my driveway. As a matter of fact, if you look at old maps of Silver Lake Road, you can actually even tell that Route 80 actually cut, well, not Silver Lake Road, but what, is it 519? The Blairstown Road.
That would be
you could see pieces of it on both sides of 80.
519 and 521 go under the cutoff, but over the cutoff. 519 goes under, 521 goes over.
So anytime you have a large infrastructure project, it seems like some roads simply get shifted, and you could still see that on the maps. Very clearly now visible here in this case that the original road came right past the house, which actually confirmed another suspicion of mine. If you look at the homes that are similar to this one in this area, almost all of them are annoyingly close to modern day roads, like too close. And I wondered, why is this house somewhat set back? I got lucky because I'm not on the road, but that's thanks to the railroad 115 years ago or so.
And the reason why, and it becomes apparent when you look at the topography of this cut here, the reason why they would not have kept the original alignment is that at that point, the bridge would have been too low. If they had gone across here, or they would have had to create something like this and built it up and all. So I guess they decided that the roadway, if you could move it over there, it's up higher, and therefore the trains wouldn't have a problem with any kind of clearance issues. Okay, Philip, so this is what remains of the bunkhouse. Obviously, this has been gone a long time because there's this, if I know my trees, this looks like a white ash tree that's in the middle of it, and that thing's pretty big. So this structure's been gone a very long time. Obviously, you found this here. I don't know what you can add to other than it's the remains of.
I know nothing about it, but it's still very clearly visible. Foundation's deep, so I don't know. Maybe I'll find the other foundation for the section house, but so far this is the only thing that's still sort of, easily visible.
And the section house would be further away from us, going towards the bridge over ahead of us, would it not be? In the photos that we've seen.
Probably 100, maybe 200 feet, but yeah, it should be over there. Should be over there. There's nothing to be said here.
No, there really isn't.
Can you imagine, for 70 or 80 years, men slept here around the clock for whatever. And all this was fields, nothing here.
But there was a lot of activity here because you had the siding work. Of course, you also had men who would have been working on maintaining the railroad, working out of this area, because if a section house is over there in the bunkhouse, well, the section house would be where all the men for the section would work out of. So this would be, even though kind of almost in the middle of nowhere, would be something that would have a lot of activity. And yeah, I mean, it probably 24/7, 365, that with the sidings and such early on, there would have been a fair amount of activity here, which is kind of interesting, being so close to this house, obviously long before you came here, but it would have been, there would have been activity here.
It is curious why they chose to build it close to a house when you have endless expanses of distance between the next house and the house after that. But it is what it is.
Well, the sidings were about a mile long, and quite frankly, I don't really know why they were placed where they were placed, other than that they were placed at intervals, and someone decided that this was, for whatever reason, the optimal place to put it. Why that's the case, now, with a section house, you would think that sections of maintaining a railroad would be more or less even in size, so therefore you have one here, one here, one here type of thing, and where you put your section house would be probably, I'm guessing, probably in the middle of that, so that you're kind of equidistant from the ends of the, that's my, and that it just ended up being here, that's all I can say, and the fact that it's near the ends of the sidings may have also had something to do with it. And so together, it maybe made the most sense when they built the railroad, that this was the most, whatever, the optimal place to put it, in spite of the fact that there's a residence, you know, not only a couple hundred yards away, if that. I don't know.
If the rails ever come through here again, we'll see if your logic holds and they decide to build, you know, some other structures here, or we'll see.
I don't.
By then I'll be retired.
Well, we'll see. We're working on it. Well, that's all I can say. Okay, well, that's the end of part 40. Hope you look forward to part 41 on the Lackawanna Cutoff.